On this episode of Cosmic Sponge, a murderous Bigfoot gets his own reality show. The Pentagon kicks off a new agency focused on monitoring UFOs, while to the north, the Canadian government ignores sightings of their own. A new analysis of the Patterson-Gimli footage provides more support for the existence of our favorite elusive cryptid. And then for our main topic, we look into alien contactees, including rides on rocket ships, alien love affairs, and the struggles of modern alien telepathy.
The man looked in through the truck windows and said, without moving his mouth or anything like that, he said, "Roll down your window. I want to talk to you." Seems like if it was telepathically, you wouldn't need to roll the window down. Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we talk about UFOs and other weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy Cope.
Tonight we're going to be talking about a very touchy subject here. Yes, we're going to be talking about UFO contactees. So touchy in more ways than one, perhaps, right?
Some of them illegal in like 40 states.
Yeah. Not Mississippi and Alabama, though.
Hey!
In West Virginia. Okay, I'll throw West Virginia in there.
Come on.
Don't want to leave us out.
We had some listeners in Alabama.
Yeah, but before we get into that, Jimmy, what you been up to this past week?
I've been working really, really hard. And so I didn't have a lot of time to look up news stories. But thank goodness, it's a really busy news week for strange things. So I was able to find 3 really cool stories.
Well, don't take mine. I only have one.
Oh, well, you want to go first?
No.
Okay, give me a hint about what yours is, and I'll stay away from the topic.
Canada.
Okay, I'll stay away from that one because I've got that one too. I'm sure that's what it is, but maybe not. I think I want to start with the response from Lou Elizondo and Christopher Mellon.
You and Lou, man. We're just going to start calling this the Lou Elizondo Affection Hour.
Hey, Lou's my buddy, man. See, I've got to play up to Lou because I'm going to make that action figure. We're going to make some money, but it's in his likeness. I need to get approval so I don't get sued.
Yeah.
Lou and Christopher Mellon both have gone on the record to say they don't think it's a really good idea that the Office of the Undersecretary for Defense, Intelligence, and Security is a good place for the new program to reside. Part of that is because they're mainly oversight and they don't have a lot of power, control, budget, or personnel in order to properly man this new agency and give it its fair due. I just thought it was interesting that they're already poo-pooing this idea. The thought is that it's basically the defense agency's way of placating the masses and Congress and still being able to do nothing.
I agree. I think that if there is any serious investigation into this program, and I read this article as well, there's an article, I'm not sure where you read it from, but I read it from The Hill.
Yep, that's where I'm at. Yep.
Yeah. I think that there's been a lot of talk in the media about it, a lot of questions in the media, and this is just essentially, in my opinion, going to be a public relations organization that may gather up a little bit of declassified information and share it with the public, share it with Congress. I think if there's any serious investigation going on within the Pentagon, it's going to be classified.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a secret program.
For sure. I'm just not sure they have one there whose primary mission is to compile information for the betterment of us all. It's mainly to keep control of it. And
yeah, they don't care about us.
No.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I just wish they could, I don't know. I wish they could let me on the inside. Let me see the aliens.
Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah, let me see them aliens.
Let me see them.
Open the freezers.
I have this thing for big eyes.
Yeah, that was one thing when I think it was James Fox's film, The Phenomenon. Mm-hmm. I think it's one of those documentaries where they were interviewing Senator Reid, ex-Senator Harry Reid, who, of course, helped get ATIP going. I found it fascinating and totally believable that, well, actually, it was Christopher Mellon when he was being interviewed. he talked to someone at the Pentagon, and they're like, yeah, we threw a lot of stuff out. We were trying to make room for other things. And, there may have been film footage. I just don't know about the whole crash saucer thing. Like, we know everything about it. And there's just some super clandestine organization or study of UFOs that we don't know about. But I do think it's quite possible that as long as this phenomenon has been around, especially in the 1950s and the 1960s, they seem to document a lot of this stuff. And I just wonder, was there films, like the film that, who was the pilot, the astronaut? Gordon Cooper.
Oh, yeah.
Who allegedly said he took a film or had a crew there that took a 8mm film or 16mm film of a flying saucer that landed at an air base, took back off again, and apparently had a good film, and it disappeared in the Pentagon, according to him. Did those things exist? Did these films exist and then just get tossed out with the other old crap laying around the Pentagon? Or is there some really serious organization that's super secret we don't know about, that maybe even Congress doesn't know about or the Senate knows about, some super secret study or something?
The cigarette man from the Fox Mulder thingy.
Well, I think it's possible.
Sure.
It could be there. Or I really think that if anyone's looking at this in a secret way, I feel like it's somewhere in the CIA, even though they've declassified quite a few documents and that shows the CIA kept notice of them around military bases and things, but not necessarily gather a ton of information on it. I still just don't know. I haven't seen enough evidence to believe there's this, vast conspiracy covering up UFOs and alien visitation to the planet. But at the same time, I think it's possible there could be some secret files that are within the bowels of the government, some bureaucrat holding on to it somewhere that doesn't allow anyone to see it because they consider it too sensitive. Think about a president or any elected official. The Pentagon looks at these people as temporary employees. They almost all, except I guess senators, have terms of service. The president's there maximum 8 years.
Yeah.
So...
yeah, I bet you it's all just sitting in a couple old Montgomery Ward boxes with some Christmas ornaments.
Maybe. I don't know.
So
Hard to say.
What do you got?
Speaking of government cover-ups, this is a story that I found actually on a webpage from WBZ News Radio. It's just where this story came up. I guess it's according to Vice News, but it says that credible UFO sightings by commercial jet pilots have reportedly been ignored and or declassified by Canadian government officials. Documents previously classified as event logs were obtained and released by Vice News in adherence with Canada's Access to Information Act. I guess this is like our FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act. The files, which include some marked as secret, detailed numerous UFO sightings made by pilots to air traffic controllers, as well as others describing how fighter jets responded to the discovery of unknown vessels appearing on radar before they mysteriously disappeared. Former RCAF fighter pilot Jock Williams, what a perfect name for a fighter pilot, Fighter Jock.
Yep.
36-year-old veteran of the Canadian military claimed reports were shit-canned.
Is that for official terminology, shit-canned? Do Canadians say shit-canned?
Apparently they do.
Did he say?
Jacques does.
Jacques said shit-canned, eh?
Yeah. This is a quote. You have evidence of the fact that they're aware of this kind of stuff. At the same time, you have evidence of the fact that nothing is happening, Williams said to Vice News. These guys are getting paid one way or the other. They might as well be investigating.
It's just the Canadians getting in on the, hey, us too. We have sightings that nobody talks about and cover-ups, and nobody's doing their damn job up here.
Yeah, I think what they're trying to say, and they're saying, shite canned here, meaning that they just don't do anything about it. I went ahead and went to the Vice webpage just to read their story on it real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Says here, just after midnight on September 20th, 2016, a Royal Canadian Air Force squadron in Ontario received a call from Vancouver air traffic controllers about a vital intelligence sighting. Approximately 20 minutes earlier, an Air Canada Express pilot flying to the city reported 3 red lights 3,000 feet above him and going slower, while 25,000 feet over an uninhabited stretch of British Columbia's rugged north coast. According to the declassified documents acquired by Motherboard, the RCAF reviewed radar data but found nothing near the plane. Within an hour, reports had been faxed to the Canadian government's Transportation Department and the Air Force's Secretive Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance Division in Winnipeg. There appears to have been no further follow-up.
So they basically don't know what this is all about.
Yeah, just looking through the article, I guess that's what the controversy is. They said they make these reports, but then there's no follow-up on it or anything, according to these declassified logs that were acquired.
Completely unheard of. Completely unheard of.
Right.
Well, you'll have that.
I'm going to post that on Facebook if you'd like to read the entire article for yourself. And it actually has a copy of the declassified document, and it says classification secret, but I guess it was declassified at some point.
When they declassify it, is it then not so secret? Or not so secret files?
It makes it unsecret.
It makes it unsecret. Hey, you know what? You know what I have here? I have something that's I'm excited to tell you about. So remember we did that episode on Portlock with Jason? Yeah. So Portlock, Alaskan. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, we have an episode a couple back from this one. I think it's sometime in November. We talk about this Bigfoot sighting in Portlock, Alaska. Well, guess what? If you didn't get enough of that episode, you can get more now on Discovery Plus, because they now have a so-called reality show, a new so-called reality show that features Alaska in its plot line. It's a very objective show, very objective, with episode titles like Village of the Damned and It Knows We're Here. It follows this story in Portlock, and you have a group of people go up there, stay around the abandoned cannery, and go out in search of this killer Bigfoot. The show follows the team's 40-day stay in and around the old village. And like I said, they had an episode called Village of the Damned, where the quartet, I guess only 4 folks there, and then probably like 300 people who are doing like the camera work and everything. But you have these 4 main characters on site who receive a priest blessing before they set out on their adventure.
Good idea.
Second episode, It Knows We're Here, is the title. And it includes a visit from a historian and what is described as a stern warning from the creature. And then episode 3, they find a mysterious obelisk in the forest and a psychic medium who wants to build a spiritual bridge to the creature, but panics instead. And then, so episodes of the Alaskan Killer Bigfoot, the title of the show, I think, is set on the Kenai Peninsula and begins streaming on December the 7th of this year, 2021, on Discovery Plus. A little plug for them. I think that could be a lot of fun to watch if you, I don't know, don't have a life, I guess. I don't know.
You know what I think? You know what I really think they should do with these things? Have you ever seen that show on the Discovery Channel called Naked and Afraid?
Yeah.
Where they dump like a man and woman out in the jungle or out in the woods, and they have to get somewhere within 30 days or something like that. I don't know. I've watched maybe one episode. They should do these ghost shows and these mystery shows naked. That would make them much more interesting.
Depends on the main actors.
Well, that's a good point.
I mean, if Danny DeVito's one of the main actors, I might pass.
I just have a hard time watching the ghost shows.
And I like Danny DeVito.
You know, where they, it's always like, wait, I felt something. Did you hear that? And then they'll replay it and it'll be like on the tape, but it's nothing, really out there.
It's a guy just standing off the thing playing an old 8-track backwards.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows? And then they always got the green camera filter on, and their eyes are glowing in the dark. And I swear I just felt an arm on me. Somebody put their hand on me, somebody pushed me down the step, and
that was me, Chuck.
I just felt a cold breeze. And then they get the psychic on there, and
it's like,
I feel a disturbance here. Many people have died right here in this very room. There's only so many of those shows I can watch.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Sorry if any of you people are into ghost hunting, but yeah. Might be a lot more fun if you were actually there doing the ghost hunting.
I think so.
In the dark. Probably be scary and everything. But to watch the shows, I've never seen one that's really got me excited. So listeners, if there's a good episode of a ghost hunting, Bigfoot hunting show out there, let me know. Let me know what it is. I'd like to see it.
Ditto. Love to watch it. I haven't watched a lot of them, so only so many hours in the day, folks.
And according to you, you're always working.
And I'm always working. So, but you know what? There is this, this is my last little news informational kind of thing. There is an article here from ISU professor who claims that Bigfoot is real. Now, this is a professor, I think anyone who's into the Bigfoot phenomena is familiar with this this professor. What I found interesting, right,
what's his name?
Jeff Meldrum.
Oh, yeah, Jeff Meldrum. He's very famous. If you watch any Bigfoot documentary worth its salt will have Jeff Meldrum on it.
Yeah, so he's a professor of anthropology and anatomy, and he does a review of the Patterson-Gimlin film, and he's done this before, but this time, one of Meldrum's peers, Isaac Tyen, has a high-tech restoration process which will refine the old 67 Patterson-Gimlin film and take the conversation, quote, from folklore legend to what actually could be the elusive biped hominoid we call Bigfoot. Other experts weigh in too, as he confers with Ken Gerhard, zoologist Roxy Furman, anthropologist Kathy Strain. They actually use Tyen uses this AI program and three-dimensional algorithms to refine the film imagery, which results, they claim, are stunning in their clarity.
Nice. I'll be glad to see that. You know, I've grown up with that film.
Yeah.
My entire life. It was shot in 1967. I was just a wee lad in that year. And I mean, very wee, like 3.5 years old.
I wasn't wee or a lad in that year.
Yeah, you weren't even thought of yet.
Well, maybe there was maybe a lot of
maybe
thinking,
thought of.
Maybe a lot of thinking going on one side of the aisle, but
you may have been in the planning stages. Or something,
yeah, exactly. You know? I was in the early planning stages.
And I just love how every so often, you know, somebody will do something. And, you know, I've grown up with it being all super shaky and, you know, kind of blurry and all that. And I realize that whenever the films are restored and they do different things that, yeah, you know, there's choices that these enhancers have to make, right? I mean, in a way, it takes some of the authenticity away because, you know, what are you enhancing? Are you enhancing the color? Are you enhancing this or that? So, you know, there's choices these people make when they are redigitizing a film. But the main thing I love is you can watch the film now without the shake. You know, they've used digital technology and completely taken the camera shake away where you can really get a very clear picture movement of the creature, which, I mean, you know, we did a whole episode on Bigfoot and we talked quite a bit about this film. And quite frankly, I think it looks great. I think if it's a hoax, man, they did a remarkable job, especially in 1967. The makeup and monster technology for Hollywood didn't look that good in those days. And so if it is a hoax, they did a remarkable job. I love watching it. I can watch it 100 times in a row, probably. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. That'll be great. Yeah,
it's going to be great. It's a new series coming out. What is the name of this series? The Proof is Out There, as they are.
Yeah, here we go. The Truth is Out There, the show on the History Channel. Yeah. Right. You know, I don't watch a lot of just straight TV anymore. I stream everything. And I had the History Channel streaming app whenever the Lou Elizondo show was out, whatever that one was. What was that called?
Unidentified.
Yeah. I watched that when it was out. So, yeah, I'm going to check this out. I didn't realize this was even out there.
Yeah, I will probably watch it as well. I am not into Bigfoot like you are or others, but I don't know a lot about it as well. And going into it, I'm incredibly skeptical. But this is the one cryptid that maybe there is something out there. Give us.
What about Chupacabra?
Chupacabra. Yeah, I'm not on board with the Chupacabra, but
well, we haven't researched Chupacabra yet,
right?
So.
I don't know a lot about it, so I could be convinced. I don't know.
You might be.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else on the news front?
Nope. That's it. That's all I got today. I think that's enough.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Be sure and post those on our Facebook page so listeners can follow up on those stories.
Will do.
We're going to move on to tonight's main topic. But before we do, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps other people find the show. Our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Be sure to check out our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. There you'll find the web store, links to all of our episodes. And also, if you'd like to support the show, look for the little icon of a coffee cup in the upper right-hand corner. That is called Buy Me a Coffee, and you can make donations there. So moving on, we are going to be talking about UFO contactees. Now, I'm going to make a little bit of a distinction here. Contactee is sort of an old-fashioned term, or an individual who has come in contact with aliens these days is typically known as an experiencer. In the 80s, where people were being taken to their bedrooms and abducted, the term abductee came along. And now, most abductees, as we would call them, prefer to be called experiencers. Even though it may be involuntary or whatever, most abductees or experiencers consider a positive experience, even though maybe they become very frightened at the time. But what we really want to focus on tonight, and I will say what really led me down this path was when we were doing our research for Mothman a couple of weeks ago, I came across this story of Indrid Cold. I read the story, and that's what happens. You start doing research for one of these subjects, one of these topics, leads you down other rabbit holes. So I wanted to come back to Indrid Cold, but I don't think there's enough there for a full episode. So we decided to just look at UFO contactees. Now, I will warn you up front. Contactees is, again, an old-fashioned term kind of brought about in the 50s and early 60s. And most of these people have some very outrageous claims. Most of these people that we're going to be talking about are probably what gives UFO research or any serious consideration of the phenomena of flying saucers or alien visitation, however you want to look at it. These are the ones that kind of give it a bad name. So some are quite humorous.
As we will see.
We're going to look at this maybe a little bit from the beginning. I've got a couple of early, what in a way you could call them contactees, and I'm going to run over theirs. But I know Jimmy's got one that really is the first one of the modern one. But so anyway, as I'm saying, I hope everyone understands that distinction, and we're not poking fun at least I'm not. I don't know about Jimmy, but we're, not really poking fun at the phenomena of UFOs and UFO sightings and the strangeness around these. I mean, I think there is something to the sightings. That's why we started this whole podcast. Jimmy and I both have an interest in this subject and think there is something strange going on. There's just too many sightings, good, solid people saying very unusual things. But anyway, we thought we would do a little bit of a blast from the past on some of these UFOs. This is not really a phenomena that you see today as much, maybe. At least if it is, I'm not aware of it. So again, when we're talking about UFO contactees, these are typically people who claim to have had some kind of contact with alien space brothers or something. They often bring back, some type of helpful news for the planet Earth of how we can do better, like stop nuclear testing or save the planet or whatever. And it all depends on what the concerns of the day are. So we had a couple of very early ones that aren't really in the UFO contactee, but I thought they were worth a look. We had in the 18th century, there was an Emanuel Swedenborg who claimed to be in psychic contact with inhabitants of other planets. In 1758, he published Concerning Earths in the Solar System, in which Swedenborg detailed his alleged journeys to inhabited planets.
Wait. What year was that?
1758.
You're kidding me.
No. These are a little precursor to the more modern UFO contactees, but it does have some of the same elements, like the psychic connection and the travel through space to other planets, right? The psychic connection to aliens or the inhabitants of other places. Swedenborg, he made planetary stops at Saturn, which of course was the furthest known planet during his era. So I guess
can't go that
didn't make it out to Uranus or Neptune or beyond because
Uranus.
All right, but didn't make it out there.
Okay.
In 1891, Thomas Blott had a book called The Man from Mars. The author claimed to have met a Martian in Kentucky. Unusually for a contactee, Blott reported that the Martian communicated not via telepathy, but actually just spoke English. In 1900, there was a book published called From India to the Planet Mars by Theodore Flournoy. Flournoy details claims of a Helen Smith, who, whilst in a trance, dictated information gleaned from her psychic visits to the planet Mars, including a Martian alphabet and a language she could not write or speak. Flournoy later determined that Smith's claims were a little suspect because her Martian language is simply a garbled version of French. On the other hand, it could be that
Martians speak bad French.
They speak bad French. Maybe the Martians visited France a couple of 100 years ago, 500 years ago, and their language drifted. They adopted it, or they taught the French language. Who knows?
Yeah, sure. All that sounds reasonable to me.
But anyway, we want to move into the more modern era of UFO contactees. And Jimmy, I think you've done a little lead work on this one. So why don't you get us kicked off on a modern UFO contactee?
Okay. It was November 20th, 1952, when George walked into the Sonoran Desert, located halfway between Phoenix, Arizona, and Los Angeles. He strode purposefully away from the main road, leaving his companions behind, believing that the submarine-shaped object hovering in the distance was searching specifically for him. It wasn't long into his walk before a translucent metallic scout ship landed nearby. The pilot stepped out of the craft and motioned to George. He was a humanoid and of medium build, tan skin, and long blonde hair.
Now, was this George or?
The pilot of the metallic craft was humanoid and of medium build with tan skin and long blonde hair. He introduced himself through telepathy and hand gestures, communicating that his name was Orthod and that he was Venusian, that is, a citizen of Venus. He would go on to warn George of the dangers of nuclear war while dispensing the wisdom and love of his people. George's friends watched from a distance, unaware of the salient moment which would launch the contactee cultural phenomena of the 1950s into outer space and beyond. We are, of course, talking about George Adamski, arguably one of the most prominent characters of all the early contactee phenomena. And before we go on, I think it's important to point out the differences between an abductee and a contactee. Now, Steve's already hinted on this, or I think it's important to draw this distinction because they are polar opposites, and often UFO stories live in that middle ground in between those two definitions. And tonight, I know we're going to get off track. So I think this would be helpful to lay out these distinctions so that we can come back to the main topic of contactee, because contactees generally mean a positive experience with contact with an alien, whereas an abductee tends to be not so pleasant.
Especially when it comes to an anal probe, but,
Exactly. Unless that's your thing. But, right. So, that's why I selected George for the contactee episode, because I think he embodies that entire cultural phenomenon, almost kicks it off and keeps it going throughout the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Yeah, he started a UFO cult, had many followers.
Yeah, so his early years, this man was fascinating, even though at the end of the day, we'll see what you think about him. But he was a soldier in the 13th U.S. Cavalry Regiment, fighting at the Mexican border during the Pancho Villa expedition. I guess you probably know more about that than I do. You're a history buff.
Right, yeah, Pancho Villa.
Yeah.
Was a Mexican bandit who kept crossing the border into the United States and robbing people and had raids and things like that. He was somewhat of a folk hero in Mexico. Finally, the United States government got fed up with it and invaded Mexico. In fact, General Pershing, who was our commander in our involvement in World War I, headed up that expedition. They invaded Mexico looking for Pancho Villa, a punitive invasion.
Right. So
they said, Mexico, if you won't do anything about it, we will. George Patton was there too.
Wow. See, this I didn't know because I'm not a history guy.
He was a captain at the time, I believe.
Wow. And so this was in 1916, 1915, somewhere around there. After his time in the Army in 1917, he married, and then he became an occultist, studying things like theosophy, which is, from my understanding, it is basically like a mixture of Buddhism, Hinduism, Platoism, Eastern philosophies, that kind of thing. It was a religion that was started by a Russian woman named Blansky. So he got into that, and then he developed his own flavor of religious teaching, and he started up a group called the Royal Order of Tibet in Laguna Beach, California. And he served as a teacher and a philosopher. And it was at this time that Prohibition was going on, and he got a religious exemption so that he could make wine. And he made
oh my goodness,
he made a killing.
I bet that was a very popular.
It was a very popular
movement.
church. So in 1933, however, Prohibition ended, and there went his cash cow. So he had to find something else to get into. So between 1933 and 1940, he continued teaching his occult-like group various philosophies from the East. And it was then that during that time that he was able to get one of his students to provide funding so that he could buy 20 acres of land at the base of Palomar Mountain. That's located in San Diego County, northern San Diego County, which is also the location of the Palomar Observatory with the Hale telescope. So with that funding from his student, he was able to purchase that 20 acres right by Highway S6. And he set up a diner and a campground. At that campground, he continued to give his lectures on Eastern philosophy and religion. He even built a wooden observatory to house his 6-inch telescope. Which
Did they use that telescope to view the Venusian spaceships? Or
yes, indeed. In 1946, during a meteor shower, Adamski and some of his friends claimed they witnessed a cigar-shaped UFO. And in the summer of 1947, of course, we had the Kenneth Arnold sighting and the Roswell crash. He then started making claims that he had seen 187 UFOs that summer in the skies over his campground. It's at that point that he turns his attention to UFOs and starts giving lectures on the topic, as it's in the zeitgeist and very popular at that time.
Mm-hmm.
He started to make claims at that time also that the planets were inhabited. All the planets in our solar system were inhabited, even though by that time we had gained enough scientific knowledge to know that was actually not the case whatsoever. Very unlikely. In 1950, he takes a photo of what he alleges to be 6 UFOs flying in formation. In 1952, he meets Orthon. In the mid-1950s, he strikes up a conversation with Desmond Leslie, who is the second cousin, I believe, of Winston Churchill. And the two of them co-author a book together called Flying Saucers Have Landed, and it becomes a bestseller, selling over 200,000 copies, makes him a lot of money, and brings him into the public as a figure of some interest. So in 1957, we have the R.E. Straith letter, which reaches Adamski. And I think that's something we should maybe pause and go into that in a little bit more detail. And then in 1959, he meets with Queen Juliana of the Netherlands. I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly, but in 1962, he attends an interplanetary conference held on the planet Saturn, which...
Oh, yeah. I'm a little curious. Did he ever say in any of his writings how well, say, the Venusians got along with the Martians or, the Saturnians? Is that what they would be called?
I think they were all living in like a utopian-like state.
Okay, and I was kind of curious, with Jupiter and Saturn being gas giants, were they gaseous beings, or was there a solid surface on Saturn?
No, I don't think reason and science enters the conversation at any point. At least that's my sense of things.
So, yeah, he did take some photographs to prove his claims. I'm not sure if you've seen any of these. One is of a Venusian scout ship that has been noted to look suspiciously like an egg incubator. Just saying, but who are we to say how Venusians design spacecraft? It may just be a coincidence.
Like an egg brooder for chickens.
So what else do we have about Mr. Adamski?
In 1957, this Straith letter, I love this because this has to deal with one of our own West Virginians. Allegedly, a representative from the Cultural Exchange Committee of the U.S. State Department sent him a letter. In the letter, it said that they knew that Adamski had spoken to extraterrestrials in the California desert in 1952, and that a group of highly placed government officials planned a public corroboration of Adamski's story. So he was proud of this endorsement, and he exhibited it everywhere he went. However, James W. Mosley reveals in a letter later that it was a hoax. He said that he and his friend, Gray Barker of Clarksburg, West Virginia, I believe, had obtained some official State Department letterheads and created the persona, and then written the letter to Adamski as a prank.
Oh.
Mosley also wrote the FBI and informed them that the letter was a hoax and asked him to stop using it as evidence to support his claim, and that Amdansky refused and continued to do it, and basically using it fraudulently to make money.
Yeah.
I guess the government at some point in time actually met with George and said, "Knock it off. You're wading into dangerous territory here, sir."
Well, I think it's worth noting that people like him, and seriously, we could go on about Mr. Adamski. He's quite a character. He has to be the most famous UFO cultist out there, and there's tons of evidence to show that he was just a fraud, so interested in making money. A lot of people followed him and, just hung on his every word and believed him. Is there anything else notable before we move on to our next case here?
The one other thing I just love about this guy is that he claimed to have met with John Pope the 23rd in a secret meeting, and that he received a gold coin from the Pope? From the Pope. However, skeptics have noted that the medal was actually a common tourist souvenir made by a company in Milan, Italy, and that Adamski didn't even take any effort when he displayed it to his friends because he kept it in the cheap plastic box in which it was sold in the souvenir shops in Rome.
Yeah, nice.
His claim was that he met the Pope at the request of the extraterrestrials he was allegedly in contact with in order to request a final agreement from the Pope because of his decision not to communicate directly with any extraterrestrials, and so offered him a liquid substance in order to save him from his gastric enteritis that he suffered from, which would later become acute peritonitis. Yeah. So.
Well, that was nice of the aliens.
Yeah. Well, what are you going to do? You got to help the Pope out.
And now, you know what? I imagine that's where Gas X comes from. This captured alien technology. They broke it down, figured it out, and now we can buy it over the counter.
That's right. Yeah. The only question is, was it Martian or Venusian?
Well, it's green. So
Martian it is. It's a red planet, but everything that comes from there is green.
All right, let's move on because, man, we could do a whole episode on Adamski. And I've got a couple here that are real treasures, so I definitely want to keep up with them. So I'm going to talk real quick about Indrid Cold. Now, I take this one a little more seriously, but maybe not quite. And again, I ran across this one because this happened in our home state of West Virginia. This also happened during the Mothman sightings. I was surprised to find out later that there were other sightings of, well, let me just get into the story, and then we'll talk about this a little more. I got this story from the Mothman Wikipedia, but I also corroborated some of these from some other websites. So the story goes on their website that Woodrow Darren Berger was a typical Appalachian man and a salesman for a sewing machine company who lived in Mineral Wells, West Virginia. On Wednesday night, November 2nd, 1966, at about 7:30 p.m., while he was returning from Marietta, Ohio to his home, he had a strange experience. He was driving his red panel truck on Route 77 in Parkersburg, West Virginia. He claimed that he saw a flying, metallic, cigar-shaped craft. The ship traveled right by his truck and blocked the roadway ahead and gradually made him slow down to a stop onto the side of the road. Woodrow also described the vehicle as resembling a kerosene lamp chimney. The aircraft was hovering about 12 inches off the road. A door opened on the craft and a being exited the ship, and the door shut with a loud thunk behind him. Later, the vehicle climbed to about 50 feet in the air above the highway as the being walked right up to Darren Berger's truck window. Darren Berger described the being as looking like an ordinary man off the street, 6 foot tall, about 35 years of age, olive complexion, dark brown hair, and wearing a glossy metallic blue coat. The man spoke to Woodrow telepathically. His mouth did not move and stated he had a fixed smile on his face. The man looked in through the truck windows and said, without moving his mouth or anything like that, he said, "Roll down your window. I want to talk to you." Seems like if it was telepathically, he wouldn't need to roll the window down. I think glass maybe has an effect on that.
Maybe. Hey, that's a really good point.
During their communication, the man called himself Indrid Cold. He told Woodrow that he meant him no harm. During the interview, he was interviewed later, I'll get to that, He said, I was very frightened, and as far as I can understand, this was all mental. There were not spoken words from him. I knew what he was asking me, but yet he stood there, and his mouth did not move. He had a smile on his face. He appeared very courteous and friendly. Indrid Cold and Mr. Darren Berger's conversation lasted about 10 minutes. Cold told him, we eat, we breathe, we sleep, we bleed, even as you do. Before returning to his flying craft, he said, we will see you again. Darren Berger later reported this event to the police. Woodrow's story gained traction in the media, gaining news coverage and attention after Parkersburg police were convinced of the story. A representative of the Air Force even contacted him soon after his accounts were documented. So on November 3rd, this the very next day, he went on live television in Parkersburg, West Virginia, where he was interviewed by the state police, the Wood County Airport, the city police, and representatives from Dayton, Ohio Air Force Base. After the interview aired, an older man claimed that he too saw a figure matching the description of Indrid Cold on Route 77 trying to flag him down, but he was too afraid to stop. Darren Berger's conversation with Cold could be corroborated. Other people claimed to see lights and fluttering vehicles at the same instant on the road. There were several witnesses that reported seeing Woodrow Darren Berger stopped on the highway talking to this man, and some even saw the flying craft parked on the road. Reports poured in of strange lights in the skies and beings all at the same time at the same place on Highway I-77 on that night, November 2nd, 1966. The Parkersburg News chronicled Darren Berger's story. A number of forthcoming witnesses, many of whom asked to remain anonymous, to have their names withheld. John Keel, that's who published the Mothman Chronicles, who also, Darren Berger, is in the book, The Mothman Prophecies, interviewed him for that. You just mentioned Gray Barker, and that's the West Virginia UFO investigator from that era, also investigated him. What kind of turns this into a contactee thing is that over the course of a month that followed, Darren Berger claimed that he was visited by Indrid Cold many times and that he even took him on a spaceship to his planet. Indrid Cold would also appear at Woodrow's front door. His wife and children even knew that this Indrid Cold was paying him visits, and they even eventually came forward saying they too saw Indrid Cold and other strange beings. Woodrow's wife was terrified and stated that these beings were much like us, traveling in everyday cars, dressed in everyday clothes, but were not human in origin. There was even one time where Mr. Darren Berger disappeared for 6 months and said he was with Indrid Cold. This is what members of his family actually believe. He would also receive mental messages from his long-distant friend, and they would come suddenly and leave piercing migraine headaches. So I guess when he received one of these telepathic messages, it gave him a migraine.
Well, that's the crappiest form of pen pal I've ever heard of.
His residents would often receive strange, unknown phone calls. Sometimes they were threats to stop speaking about his experience. Other times there were odd beeps and electronic hums. Sometimes it was just silence. The family changed their number to an unlisted one, but somehow the calls continued. And, that also matches some of the reports we got in around the Point Pleasant area during the Mothman Encounters. Remember, this is all happening the same month that the main Mothman sightings were going on in November of 1966. And we had other people that experienced the odd beeps, the strange phone calls, men in black visiting the people that saw Mothman, the witnesses, and asked them to stop talking about it. His story gained so much media attention that locals would flock to his house all hours of the night and day and wait in crowds in his driveway to catch a glimpse of his friend Indrid Cold. There's a place called Bogle Ridge. It's another location associated with the story because Darren Berger claimed to go there to meet with Indrid Cold and go on rides into outer space. Some locals claim to actually have seen spaceships there. On one occasion, 2 armed men with loaded rifles were hiding in the woods by Darren Berger's property. They observed a black Volkswagen enter his front yard. A peculiar man dressed in an all-black suit with tan skin exited and talked to Woodrow before leaving. The hunters were disappointed. They waited even longer, wanting to see something truly terrifying, but maybe they already had. Woodrow hadn't heard of the men in black, but after his visit, he was extremely frightened by them.
What was he driving?
Well, it was a black Volkswagen, so... I don't know. Maybe they were junior Men in Black. Didn't get the big, long black sedans.
What kind of Volkswagen? I mean, was one of those bugs?
I'm assuming. Yeah.
One of it's a convertible.
Well, it doesn't say.
Well, it'd have to be a convertible so his telepathy can get through it.
The article goes on to say that he did visit a Parkersburg psychiatrist and left with a clean bill of health, absolutely no evidence of chemical imbalance or disruption. This same doctor endures a reaction soon after the meeting. He is contacted in December by a most peculiar man, his name, Indrid Cold. He doesn't reach out by phone, but telepathically. Woodrow Darren Berger later related his stories to an author. In 1971, they published the book Visitors from Lanulus, which told of Woodrow's visits from Indrid Cold. And it doesn't say who the author of that book was.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that Lanulus was the home planet of Indrid Cold. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, this is, it goes on to talk a little bit more about, his reactions of, he lost his friends and family, some of his closest friends. He got harassing phone calls for years, lost jobs, lost friends, people trespassing on his property, ridicule, embarrassment, the painful headaches and depression. He suffered a bitter divorce and had to move away from the area because of his notoriety. He would later tell how his writing would disappear from his locked house and letters he sent would never reach the destination. Felt like he was being watched. He moved away to escape his past and lived elsewhere for a long time. Years later, he moved back to the area and passed away in 1990 at the age of 74. But he never denied his claims. He just simply stopped talking about them. And I think you can click on this link and it takes you to the TV interview that he did live on television.
So I was looking into this a little bit too, and apparently several weeks before Darren Berger had his encounter, a pair of boys met a man that scared both of them. The boys were James Yankitis and Martin Mouse Moonoff. They were walking home from 4th Street in Elizabeth, New Jersey. They reached a corner opposite of a local landmark called the Turnpike. There was an elevated area with a high wire fence and a very steep incline. They reported that behind the fence stood the strangest man they had ever seen. Neither of them had an idea of how he had gotten there or where he came from, and he just stood there grinning a big old grin. And I don't know why they think this is another sighting of the Grinning Man. It looks like it's just some transient probably on the other side of the fence having a good time.
Well, and that's funny, on some other podcasts and other sources, I've heard of Grinning Man. That's sort of kind of like having a Bigfoot encounter or something like that. There's an entity or some type of experience known as the Grinning Man. And I think that was the very first, what is considered the first documented case of the Grinning Man being or a Grinning Man. But there's been others. So I found an article that was dated for July 25th, 2016. The author goes into the Grinning Man. So this is where you're talking about on the night of October 11th, 1966. They described the Grinning Man as the most hulking man they'd ever seen, wasted no time running for their lives. So following Darren Berger's account, there were several other residents in Point Pleasant that claimed to have encounters with Indrid Cold as well. Or there were also claims of two more Grinning Men named Demo Hassan and Carl Ardo. Yeah, so anyway, this, the Grinning Man, and, here you go, it's rabbit holes, right? I'm researching Mothman, I run across Indrid Cold, and then I run across Grinning Man, and I look up Grinning Man, and it's like, you can keep rolling with this stuff, but that, that's something that occurs even now. I've heard of reports of people seeing the Grinning Man, just driving down the road or whatever, or seeing a Grinning Man, supposed to have the long, wide smile. I don't know. I'm going to look into that a little more some other time, but I'm going to move on with our UFO contactee. So Indrid Cold, there it is. We wanted to look at that. Again, it's a contactee, contacted from someone from outer space, communicates telepathically.
Gets migraines, has to roll down the windows.
Yeah, don't know what kind of messages that he was transmitting, other than they're a lot like just regular people.
I'm stuck on this window thing. Like if the window's rolled up and he's telepathically contacting him, does inside of his head, does it sound like roll the window down? It's like, yeah. So what I was saying.
Maybe the telepathic waves, are distorted, like refraction or something, like light waves going through glass.
By the glass. I got you. Maybe.
I don't know much about telepathy.
I don't know how science and telepathy work, or even if they work.
Right. So what else you got? I've got a couple of more I just want to touch on. Do you have another one or two you just give a brief rundown on? I've got one good one that I really want to hit.
Yeah.
After your next one.
Well, I just want to point out, so when you say Ingrid Cold and Darren Berger.
Indrid.
I'm sorry, Indrid Cold. Mr. Cold, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Mr. Cold.
Do not contact me. I don't want a migraine. When you look at that, is that a contactee? I think so. It was
most definitely a contactee. I mean, not a UFO cult contactee, but again, the more modern, or what we see today, more or less, are usually people who have the abductee experience, even though many of them now want to call themselves experiencers, because even though their original contacts with aliens seem to be negative, in the long run, they consider it a positive experience. They've been chosen, or they've been picked by the aliens, for whatever purpose. And what seems a little different now, I think, is often what's associated with abductees or experiencers or medical procedures and things of that nature, where we don't see a lot of that in the early cases. It's usually the UFO occupants are bringing us helpful information for the human race. You're going to destroy your planet if you keep playing with nuclear bombs, which were a big worry in the 50s and 60s. Nuclear power had only been around since 1945, and we saw the devastation, and everyone started building bombs. And that was certainly on the top of everyone's minds in the 1950s and 60s, that, if we, with World War II still fresh on the public's mind, that, all-out war, total war, that if we do that again, we may end life on the planet and other things. And now, as it moves on, you see ecology as being a positive message, take care of the planet. Global warming's going to kill the human race and all those sorts of things, which I come to think of it, actually, I've read, I think in some of the Bud Hopkins books, and it seems like some of them receive messages as well sometimes, but I don't think you see as much of the Betty and Barney Hill experimentation or the medical procedures to go along with the contact.
Right. Yeah, I want to get in the gray area and touch on it just a little bit, because I found this story about a gentleman called Terry Lovelace is his name, and he had... Any relation to Linda? I don't think so. And he had he wrote a book recently. He's in his late 60s now. He wrote a book titled Incident at Devil's Den, a True Story. Now, I would be very interested, if he was related to Linda, to read that book. Otherwise, maybe not so much. Maybe not so much. But we'll do some research. But please, I'll get back to you. So Terry is a it's probably now about 67-year-old lawyer, something like that. He's also a former assistant attorney general. And in 2012, a routine x-ray of his leg found some material, a bit of metal, about the size of a fingernail, with 2 tiny wires attached. Well, that's not, if the stories are to be believed, that's not that uncommon among people that claim alien abduction, to have some of these artifacts in their bodies. Right. There's a doctor I think there's a documentary out there of this doctor that's removed some of this stuff. Right. So he never talked about this incident in 1977. He was camping with one of his friends, and they witness a triangular-shaped UFO. It comes down to the ground. It forces him and his friend asleep. They get sedated somehow. They're taken on board. They can remember bits and pieces. Both of their watches stopped. And he tells this story from, I've heard him actually talk about it, and he's very compelling. And these are the kinds of stories that sort of make me take a step back, because he's well put together. He's served in public office. He's been a lawyer. He has nothing to gain except for maybe a large number of book sales, for telling his story.
Which really, let's face it, in this field, I mean, there's lots of books published. You have to be somebody pretty famous already to make it, like Whitley Strieber.
Jacques Vallée.
Published offer. Someone like this publishing one book out of the blue. I mean, there's hundreds of books published out there. So, I mean, sometimes I wonder, I think people have a story to tell, and that's why they publish some of these books.
Yeah, so it's people like him, and when you go back and look at the Ingrid Cold story, that gentleman didn't have anything to gain, seemingly, from sticking to the story throughout his entire life. So whether or not something objectively real happened to these people, or whether it's all in their heads, at the end of the day, they are convinced.
Right.
I wasn't there. I didn't see it, so I don't know what to make of it. All of my experiences tell me that objectively this stuff is probably nonsense, but you can't 100% rule it out.
Well, I've thought about this a lot, especially since we've started this podcast. What if you did have that experience? What if something did happen? Now, listen, people that claim they walked out in the desert and met someone from Venus and then take fake UFO photographs that are clearly hoaxes and then write books and start a cult, that's one thing, okay? Maybe they're delusional. I don't know. And I mean, not so much in the 50s, whenever Adamski got started, did we know that Venus was completely uninhabitable. I mean, there's nothing could live on that planet, or not any kind of form of life that we would expect. The pressures are too great. It crushes any satellite that we've ever sent there, any lander. The Russians and the Soviets had sent some Venus landers,
5 of them,
to the planet. Not only is it so hot, the atmospheric pressure is so great, it crushed it like a Coke can, within minutes. And just, they get a handful, just 2 or 3 photographs, and it's it. That's all they can do. To assume that some being's going to show up that looks like they're from Norway, and with blonde hair and blue eyes and pale skin and look just like us and be human beings and then have these helpful messages for humanity, or from Mars. And the only reason those people pointed to those planets in those days, because old science fiction authors, we knew Venus was cloudy. So the old science fiction authors imagined them as being like tropical planets, cloudy, like the Star Wars movie, Empire Strikes Back, like Dagobah, right? Like a jungle planet. Today, we know with science that there's just no way any form of life like us could exist there, nor could exist on Mars. Planets like Jupiter and Saturn, they're gas giants. They don't even have a surface, right? To me, whenever someone says they talk to a Martian or a Venusian or whatever, I mean, it's obvious. They're either delusional or they're
frauds.
Charlatans.
Yeah, you know how you can tell the difference? If they want to sell you their stories and their pictures for $1.50.
Right. And I mean, there's so many things about Adamski that point to a fraud. But at the same time, maybe he believed that. I don't know.
No.
But I mean, some of the stories you hear are very compelling, and I've thought about that often. What if I had some kind of experience like that? We read so many of these things. We listen to a lot of stories about this now, in particular. I mean, every day we're doing research into this, and I think about it a lot. It's like, what if I had that crazy experience and zero physical evidence? I have nothing. I'm not talking about a UFO sighting. I'm talking about seeing a being, more happening. I mean, it's like you would just do your best to say, man, this really happened to me.
I would be on here the next day going, all right.
Nobody.
I would be telling them next day. I'd be on here shouting to the skies. I saw this thing. Now, either it really happened or that's the last time I'm going to accept a mixed drink from Frank.
Right. All right. I got a story here I want to go over. As long as we're on contactees. Again, like I said, these stories are intended for entertainment. So I didn't take these seriously. And that's sort of what tonight's episode's about. This one's about a lady named Elizabeth Klarer, I think, or Klarer. Klarer.
Spelling for the masses.
Real quick, and this is pretty funny because you'd mentioned about your previous case of someone being a professional and stuff. So before we get into her UFO encounter, Elizabeth was born in 1910 in South Africa, a place called Natal. She attended St. Anne's Diocesan College. She moved to Florence, Italy when she was young, studied art and music, but she also completed a 4-year diploma in meteorology at Girton College in Cambridge. She learned to fly a Tiger Moth aircraft by her first husband. In 1932, she and some others formed a all-female polo team and drew a map against the Durban ladies team, which is seen as the first officially recorded ladies match in South Africa.
Wow.
Polo. During World War II, she held a responsible position with RAF intelligence. I don't have any details about what that meant, but
probably heavily redacted.
She later revealed that at age 7, Elizabeth and her older sister Barbara had their first UFO encounter. While feeding their puppies outside the farmhouse, Elizabeth and her sister claimed that they witnessed a silver disc bathed in pearly luster swooped over to them. Simultaneously, a giant orange, red, and cratered planetoid was observed orbiting and rotating high in the atmosphere. The disk rushed to meet it, pacing and guiding it northwards, while the planetoid left a smoke trail in its wake. I'm not sure what happened there, but it almost sounds like the UFO saved us from an asteroid impact. I don't know. What do you think?
Wow.
Said it guided it northwards. So I don't know. So in 1954, her sister Mary, then a resident in Withleaf in the natal Midlands, relayed to her that the native Zulu people, Zulu's African tribe, they were reporting appearances of the lightning bird in the sky. Now, I looked up what the lightning bird means. The lightning bird is, and not just the Zulu, but some of the other tribes in the area, it's a creature in South African folklore, and it's called the Impundulu. Not sure exactly how to pronounce that.
How's it spelled?
It takes the form of a black and white bird the size of a person, which is said to summon thunder and lightning with its wings and talons. It is a vampiric creature associated with witchcraft, often the servant or familiar of a witch or witch doctor. And I was going to ask you about this when I read this earlier. Is a witch doctor like the witch's doctor? I mean, is that like if the witch gets a sniffles or gets the flu or something, do they go to the witch doctor?
Yeah, that makes sense, right?
It makes sense.
I mean,
anyway, yeah, it is said to have an insatiable appetite for blood. Sometimes it takes the form of a beautiful young man who seduces women.
Wow.
So just so you know.
That's good to know. I keep my eyes out for that.
Good to know. So if you hear of one being around, head home, keep an eye on
Stop wearing dresses out.
That may be in for a nasty surprise. Her sister tells her the local native Zulu were reporting the appearances of this lightning bird in the sky. In response, Elizabeth and her children traveled to Johannesburg to the farm, and she ascended a hill that they later named Flying Saucer Hill. The following day, on December 27th, there she claimed to have seen a starship descend. It hovered 3 meters above the ground while only emitting a soft hum, its hull spinning, though the center dome remained stationary. The spaceman, who later identified himself as Akon, let's say Akon.
Is he a cousin to Orthon?
A-K-O-N. Akon was clearly visible through one of the 3 portholes, but a barrier of heat that emanated from the ship prevented her from approaching, and his scout ship departed again. Some 18 months later, she visited the hilltop again. This is on April 7th, 1956. Akon, who she later met, or Akon. Let's say Akon sounds better.
Why don't you say acorn?
No, it's just an Akon. No R in there.
No R. Okay.
Akon took her aboard the scout ship, the craft some 60 feet in diameter. Inside, she met a second pilot, stocky and darker skinned than Akon, who supposedly was a botanist as well as an astrophysicist. She was shown a lens that offered views through the craft's floor. With only a hum emanating from below and no sense of movement, they were transported to the enormous cigar-shaped mothership, which had a garden-like interior. After meeting its inhabitants, she was returned to the hilltop. During the encounter, kisses were exchanged between her and Akon.
Oh, thanks for clearing that up, because I thought maybe the captain and the botanist were getting it on.
No, Elizabeth and Akon.
Okay. Maybe that's the way they say hi.
Well, it turned out Elizabeth was a reincarnated Venusian.
Oh, really?
Just so
She's from Venus, too?
Yeah, this was revealed to her. And he was her long-lost soulmate. He further explained that they occasionally took Earth women as partners as the offspring strengthened their race with an infusion of new blood. He also claimed that a number of Venusians were secretly living among human beings. But you didn't know that.
I didn't know that. Yeah, they don't teach that in school.
Right. So on April 30th, 1956, various observers noted a steady glow, red glow, poised at a rocky section of the hill, which remained there until 2 a.m. No sign of fire could be found afterwards. On July 17th, 1956, Elizabeth made another visit to the area. She took 7 photographs of Acon's scout ship using her sister's Brownie box camera.
Did it look like a chicken brooder?
Well, I'm just going to say that there have been skeptics that say it looks suspiciously like a hubcap thrown in the air, but I don't know. Could just be some naysayers, and you know how they are.
Yeah, I know how they are.
To April 1958, a series of contacts started between her and Acon. The visits culminated in a day-long rendezvous with Elizabeth on the high plateau of Captain Peak, where he supposedly presented her with a silver ring, which enhanced her telepathic connection. Their love was consummated, and a child was conceived.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And this is a quote from her book that says, "I surrendered in ecstasy to the magic of his lovemaking, our bodies merging in magnetic union as the divine essence of our spirits became one."
Nice.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, way to go, Acorn.
After a terrestrial pregnancy, she and her MG car were transported in 1959 to Acon's home planet, Meton.
Okay. Wait a minute. I have a question, man. All right, back to the ring that she got that's supposed to enhance her telepathic capabilities. Can she communicate through Windows now? I mean,
I don't know.
Is it that powerful?
I'm assuming her MG was a convertible. So.
Now, here's my other question: is when they took a snapshot of that hubcap, did it say MG on the side of it? Morgan Garages.
I don't know.
Was their spikes also called MG?
So anyway, back on Meton, which is a planet that orbits Proxima Centauri. In the nearby multiple star system of Alpha Centauri, which incidentally is our closest stellar neighbor.
Right.
Which is true.
Yeah, I get that.
That's the only thing about this that's true.
It doesn't end in ton, though, so I'm not sure I'm buying it.
Anyway, when she's on Meton,
yeah.
she delivered a son and was given the name Ailing.
Well, that's a variation.
Only spelled with a Y, not an I. Okay, so Ailing.
Got it. Ailington.
He stayed behind on Meton to be educated, while Elizabeth reluctantly returned home. Meton's planetary vibrations affected her heart, and so she consequently could not be permitted to stay there any longer.
Right.
But she did receive follow-up visits from Acon and Ailing. The whole trip, delivery and return trip, required less than 4 months, but it lasted 9 years on Meton.
Oh, wow. So she extended life. Got it.
Yeah, she has a description of Meton.
Yeah.
There were no cities or skyscrapers as Earth people know them anywhere on Meton. Homes were scattered in park-like grounds. There was an abundance of all things needed by civilization: food, water, and all materials for building, an unlimited supply of energy on tap from the atmosphere and the universe, no shortages of any kind, and no monetary system at all.
Nice.
Yeah.
I guess.
Pretty awesome, huh? Yeah, so Clara, that was in her book. Let's see which one that one was.
But did they have microwaves, TV, dinners, and Johnny Carson?
Oh, no.
No?
I don't know. It doesn't say. But she did publish another book in 1980.
Mm-hmm.
And, I could keep on going about it. But for sure. This is the first known love affair, at least that we have documentation of, between Venusian and... I can't figure out, or maybe he wasn't a Venusian. Actually, I guess he's from Meton. She was the reincarnated Venusian. but somehow or another they were soulmates. I don't know.
It's hard to keep track of all of the stuff in there.
It is hard to keep track of that. So, yeah. There's more about this. I could keep going, but, just leave it there.
Okay.
Just watch out for those Meton people. They're here.
In secret.
They're here secretly.
So anyway, you have any other good ones? I don't have any.
I've got a ton, but I got a couple here real quick, just very quick.
Yeah. I love this.
Do you have anything on George Tassel?
George Tassel. Is that old man Tassel's boy?
That was old man Tassel's boy. So George Tassel was born in Ohio, but he moved to California. He was a mechanic, and he met a man named Frank Kreitzer, who was an eccentric loner, and he claimed to be working on a mine, somewhere near Giant Rock. And Giant Rock is out in the Mojave Desert. It's this big, gigantic...
I'm sorry. I thought you said mime.
Oh.
He was working on a mime. I was like, what do you mean?
That's his act, working on his act. He's a street performer. Right. So anyway, Giant Rock is this 7-story boulder near Landers, California, out in the Mojave Desert.
Yeah.
And so anyway, this Frank Kreitzer, he was a German immigrant during World War II. Kreitzer was under suspicion as being a German spy, and he actually killed himself with a dynamite explosion during a police siege at the Rock in 1942. I guess they wanted to question him, but it sounded like he was a real eccentric loner, I guess. Anyway, blew himself up with a stick of dynamite. But this story is not about him. It's about Mr. Tassel, who became acquainted with him. So after that happened, George went to Giant Rock, and this Kreitzer fellow had excavated rooms underneath the Giant Rock. George Tassel started hosting a meditation group there in 1953. That year, it just so happened that an occupant of a spaceship from the planet Venus woke him up, invited him on board the spaceship, both verbally and telepathically gave him a technique for rejuvenating the human body. In 1954, Van Tassel and others began building what they called the Integratron.
Now I know this guy, yeah.
Yeah, to perform the rejuvenation. According to Van Tassel, the Integratron really rolls off the tongue there. Integratron was to be a structure of scientific research into time, anti-gravity, and extending human life, built partially upon the research of Nikola Tesla. Van Tassel described the device as being created for scientific and spiritual research with the aim to recharge and rejuvenate people's cells. Apparently could do some time travel, some things like that. So anyway, Van Tassel in the 1950s began these conventions called the Giant Rock Spacecraft Convention. Somehow or another, he was granted from the government in order to build an airstrip out in the middle of this desert. So he built that. He also built some other structures, and he moved him and his whole family out there and started having these big UFO conventions out in the middle of the desert. Some people would fly in and land on the airstrip. Some would drive there. But what's funny about this story, and what I found funny about him, apparently him and Adamski didn't get along, right? So, Adamski went out in the desert and met a Venusian, and I think he felt like Mr. Van Tassel was stealing his thunder, like, hey, So he would actually say he's a fraud. He didn't really meet a Venusian. But eventually, his conventions got so popular that Adamski ended up actually speaking at one later on.
Oh, so, wow.
A few years down the road.
Eat crow.
But yeah, anyway, these conventions were held annually all the way up until 1978, from 1953 to 1978. And they had they said the peak was in 1959. They had 10,000 attendees.
Jeez.
Yeah, to have the UFO talk, to learn about his meditation. And, of course, he had, looked for investors for the Integratron. But sadly, he died of a heart attack in 1978 and never completed the device. So, just something lost to history now.
Well, so my first question is, did George Van Tassel get an invitation to the Interplanetary Consortium on Saturn, like our other buddy?
I didn't find any evidence that he did.
Okay, well, there you go. The The Integratron. Integratron. Yeah, you're right. It rolls off the tongue.
That is, yeah, man.
It has a website. You can go there.
No, you're kidding.
No, it's called the Integratron, the fusion of art, science, and magic.
Has it been finished?
It looks like it. It's
oh man.
They have public shared sound baths, and they are in session December the 2021 and February 2022. You can look up their schedule and head over there and get your sound bath.
How about
they have
that?
a gift shop. It's open without a reservation most Thursdays and Sundays. They do have COVID-19 policies, folks, so they're not protected from that. I guess the Integratron is still subject to COVID policies. You have to have
your official photo ID if you wish to attend the sound bath there. By the way, the Integratron is a big. It's a big round building that looks kind of like a UFO, like a spaceship.
It sort of looks to me like one of those observation platforms for astronomers without the telescope.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. It's in the middle of the desert. I mean, it looks like it's the only thing out there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, how about that? I did not know that.
Pretty cool, huh?
So, let's see. You got anything else on contactees? I got one more.
I've just got to say that between Mdemsky and Van Tassel, I like Van Tassel's stuff better. I mean, Mdemsky just made a stupid diner. I mean, you could get food there, I guess. Maybe the food was good.
He was too busy trying to pass on these helpful messages from beyond.
Wisdom from Orthon.
Orthon, yeah.
And Toton and Baxton and Brad Ton. Chad Ton.
There was an individual named Gabriel Greene.
I don't know him.
He graduated with a PhD from physics from UC Berkeley in 1953. He made several important contributions to the standard model of elementary particles. He claimed to have met and talked with friendly humanoid space brothers from other worlds, and he took some rides in their spacecraft and visited some of their planets. He founded the California-based Amalgamated Flying Saucer Clubs of America in 1957. And it was around the same time that he announced that he had had a meeting with flying saucer crewman from the planet Corindor that also is orbiting Alpha Centauri, actually. Not, I guess Meton is around Proxima Centauri.
Obviously.
It also orbits the star Carina, which it must be their name for Alpha Centauri. He said that he was able to maintain continual telepathic links with the wise and helpful extraterrestrials he had met. In 1960, he ran for president. He claimed to represent the Universal Flying Saucer Party and to base his political philosophy on the united worlds of universal economics. He also ran in 1962 for the U.S. Senate. He didn't get elected in 1960, in case you're wondering. That would have been J.F. Kennedy.
Are you seriously? Kennedy beat this guy out? I can't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, it turned out he got about 200 votes for president.
That many, huh?
Yeah, probably all the people in his cult. And he ran for the U.S. Senate in 1962. He claimed to have accumulated 171,000 votes, but that's what he claimed. In 1967, he published a book, Let's Face Facts About Flying Saucers. In 1972, he ran again, this time in Iowa, for U.S. president. Oh, in 72, he collected less than 200 votes. He was into, space channeling, aliens, and some of that stuff, and people subscribing to his newsletter. And it turned out that he wasn't a physicist from Berkeley. They had no record of him ever attending school there. So I'm assuming he did not make contributions to the standard model of elementary particles.
Well, he may have made some contributions to something that he thought was, at his breakfast table with his Cocoa Crunch.
Yeah. So, I found a little ad for his Gabriel Greene. It says, write-in space candidate, and it's instructions on how to do a write-in candidate on your ballot. So,
well, I mean,
Yeah, and it has like flying saucers in the background.
You look at a lot of candidates today. I mean, I might actually vote for him if he were running this next election.
Oh, I'm not getting into politics.
I don't want to get politics either, but I'm all for something that'd be a little bit fun and interesting.
Yeah, it'd definitely be more interesting when you read a political page. That's for sure. Well, man, do you have any other contactees you want to run over before we
no.
You want to discuss? Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Listeners, look up a couple of these and read about them. I mean, we obviously couldn't cover them all. I mean, there were so many. And these UFO contactees from the 50s and 60s, even in their day, okay, they were not taken seriously by serious UFO researchers such as Donald Keyhole. I do know Edward Ruppelt, who had been the head of Project Blue Book in the 1950s. He had interviewed some of these characters, but, he didn't take them seriously. I guess it was just part of his job when he was, in Project Blue Book. So they had to look at everything. It is kind of a topic that takes, leads to less credibility in the study of UFOs and flying saucers and this type of phenomena. But I think at the same time, it's good to know about these things, just if somebody brings it up in conversation. So, but there's a lot of people that I guess these guys are charismatic, and some people just will follow anything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of cults started with a lot weirder or whatever. I mean, if you come up with, I guess the idea is if you're a leader and you're charismatic and you think you can tell people that you have the answers to their life, or you have answers from beyond, whether you're a psychic medium or a UFO contactee or just some, someone into transcendental meditation or something like that. There's, I guess some people out there are just looking for something to believe in, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's how these things get started.
I think the lesson here is that if anybody claims to have contact with an alien whose name ends in on, then you might want to just back away slowly. Keep eye contact. Don't break that, and just back away slowly. Yeah. Or if they claim that they have a photo of a flying saucer they want to sell you that has General Motors or MG written on the side of it, right. Might not be legit.
Right. Yeah, you may want to look a little deeper into that one.
Right.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, I want to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. It helps other people find the show. If you would like to support the show, look for the Buy Me a Coffee icon on our webpage, which is cosmicsponge.com. If you would like to reach out to the show, our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Look for Cosmic Sponge on Facebook and Instagram. On Facebook, you will find a lot of the stories we talk about on the show, plus more. And Jimmy makes funny Instagrams, so look at them. They're funny. He's usually making fun of me, but sometimes other people.
Sometimes me.
All right. Well, with all that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and I'll see you next week.
And Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies, but your feet on the ground. Catch you next week.
And don't forget to keep your wallet in your pants when UFO contactees show up.
For sure. I don't know. I wouldn't mind having some of those pictures.
Yeah. Hey, join my cult. I just need all your money and property.
You're saying that?
And then I'll pass on these secret messages about how to save the planet.
You're saying the Venetian women are shirtless? Photos are $1.50? I got $10 loose in my pocket.
All right, man. Let's get out of here.
Excellent. Catch you next time, man. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account, firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.